Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. No countdown. Cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we have an exceptional guest whose leadership and dedication have made a significant impact both in the military and the civilian world. Joining us is Colonel David Fivecoat, a retired U.S. Army veteran who served with distinction for 24 years. David's military career is a testament to his resilience and commitment to excellence. He's led troops in Kosovo, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and has served as the commander of the Airborne Ranger Training Brigade. One pivotal moment in his career was Operation Just About, the aborted parachute jump to seize the Port-au-Prince International Airport in Haiti in 1994, significantly shaping his perspective and leadership approach. After retiring from the Army, David founded the Fivecoat Consulting Group, where he leveraged his extensive experience to coach gritty leaders and develop resilient organizations. His consulting firm has helped thousands of executives achieve their full potential through innovative coaching programs and keynote speeches. David is also the author of Grow Your Grit, Overcome Obstacles, Thrive, and Accomplish Your Goals. He's currently working on his second book, Atomic: Leadership Secrets of the Manhattan Project. David's journey from a military officer to a successful entrepreneur and author is inspiring. His philosophy of hard work, organization, and responsibility has guided him through his career transitions, and his insights into the developing grit and perseverance are invaluable. Join us as we delve into David's remarkable story, exploring his military service, personal challenges, and ongoing mission to inspire and empower others. So let's dive in and warmly welcome David Fivecoat, a true embodiment of what it means to be a strategic veteran. David, brother, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. And it's great to have another 3rd Infantry Division veteran to share war stories with and discuss the transition.
Yeah, man, definitely. Give me just a second. My dogs are barking at something. I don't know what it is. Oh, the UPS man just dropped off a big piece of fitness equipment, so they're not happy about that. Anyway,
Right. My dog does not like the mailman, the UPS guy, or the FedEx guy.
okay, so you understand then. No, it's definitely great to have another third ID guy here, particularly one who's responsible for some of the training and was on a lot of the same deployments as I was. So welcome to the show, man.
All right. Well, excited about this. Looking forward to the talk.
Yeah, man. So let's just talk a little bit about where you grew up, your early life, what that was like, and what really inspired you to join the military.
Yeah, so I grew up in Delaware, Ohio. It's about 25 minutes north of Columbus, Ohio. When I was growing up, it was the county seat. It was a separate entity. Columbus, Ohio, has grown so much that it's now one of the northern suburbs of Columbus. My parents still live in and around Delaware, so I get back there pretty often. Actually, I'm headed there next week. But but grew up kind of normal childhood. Loved to read though, and my mom used to take me to the Delaware County District Library, and I got a special exemption so I could take more books out because I was reading them so fast. So she didn't have to take me back as often. But I got really deep into trying to read every single World War II history book I could get my hands on. And of course, all the military leaders in World War II, the Pattons, the Eisenhowers, the MacArthurs, were all West Point grads. My family really didn't have a history of military service. My grandfather had served in the Navy for a couple of years during World War II, along with his brothers. But I didn't really know him growing up because he passed away when I was 5. So we didn't really have this tradition of military service. But I was bit by the military bug and just loved to read history. I played sports growing up. I played football, baseball, wrestled, played a little tennis. But when it came time to apply to colleges, it was sort of just a natural fit that I would apply to go to West Point. And so I applied to West Point. I got in early. I went and visited overnight. Got to stay in the barracks with a couple of plebes, which is what they call the freshmen, and just fell in love with it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going here. Little did I know that West Point was not the normal college experience for for those folks out there. I like to tell the story about how I got busted while I was a cadet. I got 3 sips of beer, and then the officer in charge walked in on a group of us we had like a 12-pack. There was 9 of us. We were drinking beer. I got 3 sips of the beer. The officer in charge walks in, busts us all for having beer. And I ended up having to walk 65 hours on the area, which means you get in your best uniform, you get inspected, you have a rifle, and you walk back and forth across this. It's basically a big parking lot for 50 minutes every hour, and you get a 10-minute break, and then you come back. You can do 2 hours on Friday and 3 hours on Saturday, and if it's a federal holiday, you get another 5 hours on Monday. But it takes a lot of weekends to work that off, and while you're working it off, you don't get to leave West Point. And so after getting busted for drinking a beer, I quickly discovered that there were lots of rules at West Point.
So you had no eyes. So our first guest on the show was Rich Mulder. He was also a West Point graduate. And next week's episode that releases, Scotty Schneider was also a West Point graduate. And I love asking them this question that I'm about to ask you, because I always looked at the service academies as 4 years of military before the military. Did you have any clue that's what you were getting yourself into?
I knew that, it's the devil's bargain, right? You're going to get free college, but you pay for it with 5 years of your life. And I knew that the running joke in my family was that there was going to be less rules at West Point than my mother had put on me and my brother. But you don't really understand that until you get into it. And without the military background, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I had some, definitely freshman year, when you don't get to leave West Point a whole lot. You're stuck there. I definitely had some second thoughts about, hey, should I stay and do this? Is this really what I want to do? And one thing, at least that struck me, was that West Point, you're not transferring. It's not like, you're at a normal college and you decide you don't like Clemson and you'd really rather go to Alabama or Ohio State or something like that. It's considered quitting. And so that, of course, was one of those huge factors that, hey, I wanted to persevere. My dad was this hardworking guy that was always, strong work ethic, and, you don't quit anything. And so that was a struggle, internally, once you start to figure out that, hey, there's a lot of rules here. And, it's not the fun college experience that you see in the movies.
For sure. So when you get to West Point, like, did you get to choose your kind of your degree path and your branch, or like how does that work, and how did that end up for you, and what did you end up with a degree in? I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say it has something to do with military history, just because you growing up reading every World War II book. Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I remember doing my senior history research paper on the Battle of Stalingrad. So I also was fascinated by that stuff and didn't really come from a military family either. Had my grandfather served in World War II, but like you, I lost him when I was pretty young, I think 6 or 7. And then my uncle was a Vietnam vet, but he never really talked about it ever. And kind of, we don't even talk to this day, because when I made the decision to join the Army, he told me I was making the dumbest decision I had ever made in my life. So there's some drama there, but I am curious, like, what was your degree in, and how did you end up infantry branch?
Yeah, you have a good intuition there. So I got it. I got to West Point, and one of the things I got put into um, I got I had enough history credits. I had a college history credit along with a couple AP classes, and so I got to do what they call validate out of the freshman history class. And there was a special group of us, about 50 freshmen, that all got put into history of the military art, which is the military history class that everybody has to take at West Point at that point in time. And it had this phenomenal instructor, Dave Lamb. He was an infantry officer, had participated in the invasion of Grenada in '83, and told these wonderful stories about the 82nd Airborne Division and infantry and Ranger School, and of course military history. Um, and so at that point, as a young impressionable freshman, you know, it sort of fell in place, because I didn't know what I wanted to do once I got out in the Army. I thought maybe I wanted to maybe be armor, maybe be infantry, who knows, maybe fly helicopters. I didn't know. And then I had this amazing instructor, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I am going to major in history. I'm going to go infantry, and I want to go to the 82nd Airborne Division. And it all sort of fell in place after I got that one instructor, and I had a couple more along the way. Another one, Guy LaFaro, who was also infantry ranger, 82nd Airborne Division, and so he came along later in my time at West Point. But had these two amazing instructors that sort of shaped the path that I was going to eventually take. For both at that point in time at West Point, and it's a little different today, but at that point in time at West Point, what you branched and where you got to be assigned was all based on your class rank. And so your class rank was based on a combination. It was like 60% academic, 20% military, and 20% physical. So like what you got on the APFT impacted where your future assignment was. And so it was, and every year they would re-rank order everybody from number one to my class had 1,000 people that graduated in it, but to number 1,000. And the number one guy gets to pick anything that he or she wants. And ironically, one of my roommates, Mark Waymeyer, was our number one guy. And so he got to pick, and he picked aviation and Fort Bragg because they were all open to him. By the time, but I had sort of wargamed as a sophomore, sort of what my class rank had to be in order to make infantry. Infantry was pretty easy. You could be down to about 990 and you could make infantry. The Fort Bragg was a little bit more difficult, and I had done the math, and I figured I needed to be about 150th in the class to get Fort Bragg. And so that became my goal for the rest of the time at school, was to get to that point where I could, go infantry and go to Fort Bragg.
Get what you want. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I ended up graduating about 125th in the class, which got me Fort Bragg, got me everything that I wanted, and got to go and do great things at Fort Benning and then Fort Bragg.
Awesome, brother. That's it's interesting. So much of what I experienced in the Army was based on PT score too, right? So I'm not surprised to hear that was a big chunk of your OML at West Point. And why would I expect it to be any different? What were some of the key experiences from your time at West Point, and how did they shape your military career all the way from, a junior lieutenant all the way up to a full bird colonel by the time you retired?
Yeah. So one of the great things about West Point, despite the rules and all that, was the phenomenal education. Small class sizes. Most of my classes were no bigger than 20 people. You had access to your professors. They were committed to trying to make you as good as you could be. But then the second thing was the lifelong friendships that I made. And there's a group of 5 guys that I am super close with. I still see on a regular basis, and just they're my close-in friend group. There's 4 of us that go play golf every spring. We've done that now for the last 14 years. The winner gets the salmon jacket, and has to plan it for next year. And that sort of lifelong friendships was one of the key things that I took away from West Point. Um, as far as things that influenced me, I was lucky enough to get selected to go on a couple of staff rides as part of the history department, and so I got to go on one which was called. It was in the summer. It was part of our summer quote unquote summer training, but we got to. It was called the German Army Attacks, and we got to follow the German Army in 1940 as they attacked from Germany through Belgium into France. We basically followed Rommel's division through the Ardennes, and then we backed it up and we recocked and went in back into Germany, and then we did the German attack during the Battle of Bulge and followed Kampfgruppe Piper. And those 3 weeks, to walk on that terrain and see the battle and remember, in the be careful what you wish for. I didn't see combat until I was 32 and a captain promotable. Not like you that saw it when you were 18, but it was at that point in time that was the closest experience that we could get to try to figure out, hey, are you going to be able to make decisions in this environment? Do you understand what the terrain is doing? Can you see what these leaders were struggling with on both sides, both the Allied side and the German side, as they tried to conduct this attack? And so that was a really sort of shaping experience for me. I also got to go to airborne school as a cadet and graduated from that. But the Army sent me to air assault school as well, and I actually failed at air assault school. I could not do the sling load inspection. I missed. You had to. I can't even remember what the standards are, but they had put some gigs in it, and you could miss up to 2 or 3 or whatever, and you got it out. I got an opportunity to retest, and that whole, look at what you're touching, see, and stay focused in the present at what you're looking at, and figure out if it's right or wrong. I just couldn't get it, and that was one of those things that it was like, man, you meet failure, and you got to figure out how to deal with that. And that was one of the things that I liked about the Army is, I was not always successful, but it developed some resiliency and developed that idea of, hey, even if I get kicked in the face, I'm going to get right back up and go at it. I eventually graduated Air Assault School in 2003 at the Sabolowski Air Assault School at Fort Campbell. And so I redeemed myself almost a decade later, but it was one of those things that you feel like it's the end of the world when you aren't successful.
Particularly because as an infantry guy and an enlisted guy, I've not met anybody that has failed air assault school. So first of all, thank you for sharing that with us, because most people wouldn't want to talk about that, be embarrassed by it, or that element of vulnerability. So I appreciate that you were willing to share that with us. But also it serves as a lesson, right? Like you met failure and you didn't let failure, stop you from achieving that thing. You eventually did it. And I assume it's not because you needed to wait a decade to do it. It's because the Army got in the way and you didn't have a chance to go back until a decade later. So, I totally understand and respect that. And I appreciate that you're willing to share things like that because, I think oftentimes a lot of people are going to hear, oh, this guy, this David Fivecoat, he's a full bird colonel, he's infallible, he doesn't make mistakes, failure doesn't affect him like it does. And I think part of what this show is here to show is you're just as human as I am and anybody else is. And I lived for a long time with this notion that I wasn't capable of having conversations with people like you. Like I just didn't know enough, or I wasn't smart enough, or I couldn't hold my own. And that is absolutely not the case. And that was definitely a self-sabotaging kind of failure moment that I had to work past too. So I think this is cool that you're willing to share these adversity and these moments with us.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I do suspect you've met some other people that have failed at air assault school. They just are
They probably didn't
admitting
tell
it.
me. Right. Yeah, for sure. So you did several deployments. You're one of, other than the special operations guys whose deployments are shorter, 3 to 5 months or whatever. You have 3 to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan, and then Kosovo and Bosnia. So your deployments kind of run the gamut from various ranks. So would you mind sharing, kind of some pivotal moments or some lessons learned as you kind of developed as a leader through your time deploying and your 24 years in the Army?
Yeah. So one thing I wish the GWAT veterans would all do is, rather than say number of deployments, that we would all agree that we would just say number of months deployed. Because
Yeah,
I'm at
for
like
sure.
41 months, and there'll be this guy, oh, he deployed 6 times. Well, yeah, it's great, but you only did 18 months. I did that almost in one deployment, and so
Yeah, I'm at 49 months deployed,
right.
so I'm with you on that. It's just that's the way people want to talk about it. I did 3 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. I did 27 at 3 months. I still have more combat time than you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. No, I think you and I are going to start the momentum in the veteran community here to change it to number of months, to recognize more us conventional guys that did the long hard slogs rather than the short 3 monthers. Yeah. So I was actually on uh, the deployment racetrack. We would basically from 1998 through 2011. So from 98 to 99, I went to Korea and did a year in Korea. And I know that isn't technically a deployment, but was home for like 4 months, 5 months, and then went to Kosovo for 6 months. Came home for basically 19, 20 months, went to Bosnia for 6 months, came home for less than a year, did the invasion of Iraq in '03, was back home for just over a year, and then did the '05 deployment with 3ID that you and I share some common ground on, and then came back for just over a year and did the '07, '08 15-month deployment as part of the surge in Iraq. Came out of that, was home, I think, 18 months, and then turned around and did the surge into Afghanistan for 13 months. Um, and then at that point in time, I went to the War College. I worked in the Pentagon for 2 years, and then took command of the Airborne and Ranger Training Brigade. Uh, Ironically, as I was getting finished with my command at the Airborne and Ranger Training Brigade, my branch manager comes back at me and goes, "Hey, you haven't deployed in a little while." I was like, dude, I didn't deploy because
really?
I went to the Pentagon because you told me I needed to go to the Pentagon. And then, I commanded a training brigade. And so I didn't deploy. Like, well, you need to deploy again. Like, dude, I got 41 more months. Um, I think there are others out there that don't have that much that might need that deployment. But anyway,
Yeah. No. What year were you at the RTB?
2014 to 2016.
So that would have been when they started pushing dwell time pretty hard, right?
Um, I would say the dwell time stuff was, we were winding down. By the time I got to ARTB, we had pretty much wound down in Afghanistan and were completely out of, or had just a small residual force in Iraq, and hadn't started gearing up into the Syria stuff yet. Um, but the branch guys saw it as, hey, they just looked and said, hey, you haven't deployed in 5 years, so we need to get you back on the horse.
Yeah, the only reason I asked that question is because I think between my what second and third would have been when we did. Were you at the third ID when we did the Sea Smurf mission? Do you remember that by
I
chance?
do. That was the chemical response stuff.
It was like a global response to anything chemical, nuclear, natural disasters. Basically, I know my life was miserable for like 14 months because our battalion or brigade was the only one that was participating in it. I can't remember, but we would constantly be on red cycle. So, you're talking like a 2 hour recall, bags always packed. You're not going out and doing anything fun whatsoever. And that period of time was the longest amount of dwell time I had had. And I was like, well, this isn't even really dwell time. Like, I can't do anything. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I think at most I had like 11 months between deployments. I remember coming back from the first deployment with the third ID on the parade field. We had orders for the second one. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, how does this even work? So no, that's I get it. You called it the deployment cycle. That's what it was. Cause every other year in my career, I was deployed. I think it was more familiar for me to be overseas than it was to be a garrison
yeah,
soldier.
yeah. Well, and certainly overseas. The thing I liked about being overseas was the idea uh, that there was more opportunities for creativity and freedom, and the opportunity to try to solve problems and do things where the bureaucracy stateside uh, constricted you on what you could do and what you were able to do. Um, Earlier you asked about, what were some of the formative things in those sort of deployments, and I'll say the Kosovo deployment was actually one of the more interesting deployments that I went on. We weren't getting shot at, but at that point in time, we went in 3 months after the air war ended. Uh, the Serbs had ethnically cleansed the Kosovar Albanians out. The Kosovar Albanians came back in after the air war and started to ethnically cleanse the Serbs out. And there was this low level guerrilla campaign amongst uh, the Kosovar Albanians to try to intimidate and convince the Serbs to move back out of Kosovo, back into Serbia. Um, and so, we did air assaults, we did cordon and searches, we did all kinds of things without there weren't many shots fired. We carried live ammo, but we were under the quote unquote peacekeeping piece. But it was also pre 9/11, so it was like the only, between it and Bosnia, they were the only things going on pre 9/11, and we had this really robust sort of approach to things. The battalion commander was a great guy to work for, Mike Ellerby, who had fought in Somalia for the 10th Mountain Division, um, had aggressive approach, and I got to do a lot of things. And I was the assistant S3 for the battalion, so I was writing the plans, I was managing the talk, and then once a week, my boss would let me go out on one mission, and so I got to get out, do some stuff, and then also, learn how to run a battalion in combat, or it wasn't combat, sorry, peacekeeping. And so that really shaped, uh, sort of the realm of possible, um, and what could be done. Um, I don't know, that was a really, formative part for me.
Another one that you had mentioned in kind of when you booked to record with us was Operation Just About in Haiti in 1994. And you said that it really did influence your approach to leadership. So would you mind elaborating on what the operation was supposed to be about and why that really shaped your approach to
Yeah.
leadership?
So if you remember, in 1989, the United States invaded Panama, and the operation was called Operation Just Cause. And then in 1994, the United States, at that point in time, the ruler of Haiti was causing a lot of people to get on boats and try to migrate to the U.S. And it was very risky, and there were a lot of fatalities in it. And so the U.S. Asked him to step down as the leader. He said no, and we said, okay, we're going to make you. And so they put a carrier off the coast of Haiti along with a whole bunch of guys out of the 75th Ranger Regiment. They put the 10th Mountain Division on some ships, and then the 82nd Airborne Division. Actually, we went through the whole planning cycle, and we rigged up with live ammunition and got on planes. And I took off in a C-130 with my platoon. It's every platoon leader's dream. I show up in the 82nd in May. We train hard all summer. I have this great platoon, and in September we get locked down, and we say, okay, we're gonna invade Haiti. And oh, by the way, I had this battalion commander by the name of Stan McChrystal that you might have heard of. That was also a
I've heard of them.
phenomenal,
Yeah.
phenomenal guy to work for. And so, it's all coming together. I got the platoon. West Point plays up this whole, thing, about how, platoon leaders your best time of your life. And, you're like, I'm going to take my platoon and I'm going to jump into combat, and I'm going to, have this experience in Haiti, like these guys have talked about in Panama. And we flew halfway down, and a negotiating team with former President Carter and Colin Powell went to Haiti while we were in the air. And CNN actually was at the end of the runway filming the C-130s taking off, and they're evidently playing in the room where they're having this negotiation. And we get down to the tip of Florida, and they actually turn us around because Cedras, the dictator in Haiti, capitulates and says, okay, I'll leave for a $10 million package and the opportunity to go live wherever I want to in the world. And we say, okay, that's great. And so we turned around and went back to Fort Bragg, landed at Fort Bragg, we kept all our ammo for 24 hours because there was a possibility that we were going to go back in the next day. And we ended up not going back in, had to turn in all the ammo and then go back to the barracks and go home. And so the lieutenants hosted this party after we got released, and there was a big sheet out front that had a set of Master Blaster airborne wings and then a little dashed gold star for where the mustard stain for the combat jump was going to be. And we joked that the operation was called Just About because we just about got to combat.
Oh man. I love how the Army does that to us, though, right? They like hype you up and get you all ready and lock you down to do something that you think is going to be like you're just chomping at the bit to do it, and then without fail, they take it right out from underneath of you, and you're like, yeah, now you're just like stuck. Like I got all these, and I can't imagine what that's like for you as a platoon leader, because you've got a platoon of infantry guys who have just trained, like you said, all summer, who now the very real possibility of going to do their job is there, and it's just snatched out from underneath them. I can imagine you probably had some not very happy soldiers in your platoon.
Yeah, well, and they weren't really happy because somebody decided that they didn't want to jump their grenades in and hit them in one of the porta potties, and so we had in the account of, we weren't allowed to be released till we found the grenades, and somebody had stuck their grenades in the porta potty. So once those got dug out, then we got released. So, a lot of pent up frustration amongst the infantry, the guys in my platoon. But the reason why that, there's a lot of officers that come in and serve their 4 or 5 year commitment and then get out and go on to other things. And why I mentioned in the in the comments on why that influenced me, there were three of us that were super close that were all in that battalion, three lieutenants, myself, Jason, and Pete. And the three of us all stayed in the Army for over 20 years. And at some point in time, about year 15, we got together and we had this, of course, there was lots of alcohol involved. And we were discussing and we said, yeah, we all sort of agreed that we probably wouldn't have stayed in if we had gone, we had jumped into Haiti because we had gone and done, you sort of fulfilled everything that you wanted. There didn't look like, if 1998, there didn't look like there was a war on the horizon. We didn't know about 9/11. And it was like, okay, we sort of accomplished everything that we were going to, and our life arc would have taken a different direction at that point in time. And
so speaking to that, when did you decide to make the Army a career, or did you always know it was going to be a career?
I did not. And frankly, my entire time in the Army, I kept saying, "Hey, I'm going to stay until it stops being fun." And sort of, I did the first 5 years and had that Haiti experience. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stick it around and do company command. And I did company command, and right at the tail end of my company command, 9/11 happened. And so then there's like, well, we had just, at that point in time, we just invaded Afghanistan. I'm like, all right, I'll stick around for a little while longer. I went to Bosnia right after company command for 6 months and did some great work there, going after terrorists and folks that are called PIFWICs. And then had an opportunity to join the 101st and did the invasion with the 101st. At that point in time, in 2000 and late 2003, I'd been in the Army a decade, and then you start weighing, hey, do I stay in and go for the pension or not? And I was like, well, I really enjoyed the time with the 101st. I'm like, okay, I'll stay. And then that sent me to the 3rd Infantry Division. And you don't, as you make those decisions, you can't see forward. And would I have stayed in after the invasion of Iraq if I had known I was going to do another 3 combat deployments? I don't know. That was a hard run. And for the folks that aren't military veterans that are listening to this, the deployments are basically 18-hour days, 6.5 days a week for a year with a 2-week break in the middle. When you talk about a very intense workload, as a major, I did all those deployments as a captain, a major, and then a lieutenant colonel. You're not talking about easy jobs. I might have watched a couple of bootleg DVDs while I was overseas, but it wasn't like I was sitting someplace playing Call of Duty all day. You're working those 18-hour days, writing orders and managing things and trying to solve problems and do all the other tough things that are involved with managing a 700 or 3,500 person organization in an austere environment where folks are trying to kill you. And so
right. They're spread out. They're not all co-located, right? You've got elements like, I remember the Afghanistan deployment for us being way out in the tip of the Horn of Panjwai, Kop Mushan, furthest away from everything. Nobody wanted to come out there, and it's just us, just the company, like 90 dudes. That's it. And so you gotta pay attention to all that stuff. No, I felt the opposite. I think the deployments are what kept me in. And I kind of struggled to come to terms with that. But I think for me, even as hard as the deployments were, sometimes it was 7 days at a time that you're working. you know what I mean, for us out on 7-day ops, 5-day ops, whatever it was. But, and then on top of that, when you're on the cop, it's still guard duty for the enlisted dudes, you know? So there's not really any reprieve, but I think for me, it was just the simplicity. I don't have to worry about anything. You know, the rules are very clear, right? It's kill or be killed. You know what the job is, you know what the mission is, and that's it. And I liked simple like that. I did, you know? So I appreciate you sharing that with us. This is the part of the show where we start talking about your transition, and 24 years is a long time. I made it to 12 and a half, so about half of what you had. And I know it was hard for me. And I think there's this misconception. I held this misconception for a long time that, you know, officers weren't as susceptible to falling into what I call the transition hole as, you know, maybe the enlisted guys are. And having talked to several Navy commanders on this show, that is absolutely not the case. So are you willing to share, like, what were the main challenges with your transition, and, you know, what kind of you know, did you have substance abuse problems? Did you have, anger issues? Like, what did your transition look like, and what were the struggles that you faced in your transition?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, I led the Airborne and Ranger Training Brigade from 2014 to 2016. The ARTB has the Airborne School and Ranger School in it together. Um, it 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 wasn't that brigade until 2013. Plus, they threw in 12 helicopters in 2 detachments, both a medevac set of helicopters and 7 lift helicopters to supervise. Um, while I was there, we we led the gender integration of Ranger School. The first women came, and then the Army, because of that program, opened up all jobs in all units to women. And so it was an extremely stressful time. We were in the eye of the media for an entire year. And oh, by the way, I was also going through a divorce at that point in time. Um, uh, we have she's now 15, but she was 4, 4 or 5 at that point. No, 6. Yeah. Sorry, don't do math in public. I'm a history major. I am not. I'm not a math major. I have to write it down and carry the ones and do all the other good stuff. Um, so, for me, I got done with Airborne Ranger Training Brigade. I asked to stay on Fort Benning, for now Fort Moore, for an extra year in a colonel's job. Branch allowed that, and then about 3 months after I got into the new job, they were already asking me where I wanted to move at that point in time. My divorce wasn't finalized, and I'm like, okay. Part of my piece was, the marriage hadn't been successful, but I felt like I needed to stick around Columbus and be a good dad, and at least give that a shot. And so at that point in time, it became clear, like, hey, look, I'm done with the Army. I'm not gonna chase the brass ring anymore, and it's time to get out and try to figure out something different.
Well, is a lot of that because at that level, at the full bird level, so the next stop is a star, right? And I assume it's very political at that level, right? And so that means you're probably going to be devoting a lot more of your time. And I know you're already devoting a ton of your time to the Army. I just feel like, once you start getting up to like the 1-star level, even the full bird level, you guys' time is basically at home non-existent. It's all Army all the time, right?
Right. Yeah, and even as a colonel, you're doing a lot of doing a lot of work. Um, at that point in time, the path to have been successful would have been to not stay on Fort Benning after I came out of command, immediately go to Iraq or Afghanistan for a year, and then come back and try to find another job at that point in time. Um, you know, for my daughter and wanting to be a dad, I felt like, hey, look, I've been on this. I felt like I had done my part. I had done my 41 months in combat, uh, and so at that point in time, it was clear that I needed to move on. Um, and so, there are, and so the job that I held for my last year uh, had enough flexibility that I could work on preparing to get out, going through the process, the VA process, the finding a job process. SkillBridge was not a big thing at that point in time, and so I didn't have that opportunity. I applied for a couple different options. There's a regional bank here in town, Synovus. They wanted to have me come into their leadership and development portion of the business. Um, but one of the things that took them, they didn't have a job position for me. And it took them, I did like 6 interviews with them, and it took them 8 or 9 months to actually create the position. By the time they actually created the position and called me back, I had already accepted a job someplace else. It was nice that they did that, and I really appreciate it. But I just tell that story because I think it's worthwhile for the veterans that are starting to transition, that sometimes the corporate world doesn't move on your schedule. And so those jobs that might be the ideal job, you may have to have a little bit of patience. The SkillBridge program, of course, helps bridge that gap and put you in a company that maybe offers you a job and you can move seamlessly in and out of it. But it's one of those things to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So did you have any issues with losing your sense of purpose and identity when you got out? Did you struggle to really figure out who you were as a person, not Colonel Fivecoat, but David, right? Like, because that seems to be, I know for me, I didn't have a clue who I was. I was Staff Sergeant Peters, who the Army had broken down at 17, 18 years old and built back up to be the machine that they wanted me to be for the 12 and a half years that I was in. So can you speak to struggles that you had like that?
Yeah. I will say that, looking back on it, folks that are preparing to transition should give themselves 2 to 3 years to actually make that transition. Um, it, I thought I made a quick transition, but as I look back on it now, I've been out 7 years. Yeah, now. Um, that it really took me 2 to 3 years to really make the transition from Army into corporate. And I went a different path than a lot of folks. And I know a lot of folks that get out, will take that contracting job back with the Army or a GS job back with the Army. And that's actually a pretty good fit, um, because it doesn't require a whole lot of transition other than finding yourself. And you're able to, the joke, it always is, you take off the ACUs one day, and then the next day, you come back into the same job wearing a shirt and tie. Um, that doesn't take a whole lot of transition. I decided to go a different route and go out into sort of the corporate world, and I worked for a company for a couple of years, and then I started my own company earlier than that because it was an LLC and it was a pass through because I was a 1099 guy. So TFCG has existed since 2018 as an LLC, but I didn't really get into it hard until 2020, and so uh, that's one of the things that I think folks need to consider as they consider their transition. If you come out of the Army with a pension and the world's cheapest medical care, TRICARE for life right now, I'm paying $60 a month for me and my daughter. I think the dental care is more expensive than the actual health care. Um, and but you have the ultimate safety net to become an entrepreneur and go be a podcaster, or uh, be an executive coach, or be a keynote speaker, or whatever you want to do. I do encourage veterans, though, to think about, if you have that entrepreneurial spark, to go work in another company for a year or two, just so you see what another company does, because you will avoid so many mistakes as you stand up your own company.
Oh man, I love that advice, because that's advice that I give to the transitioning veterans who do reach out to me and want to just talk about the transition or whatever. And they're like, I want to build this thing on the side, but I know I need to get a job to take care of my family. And it's like, okay, well, get that job in that thing that you're interested in building and learn everything you can, and keep the mindset that this is temporary. This is the means to the end, to be building the thing over here, so that as the thing over here that I'm building starts bringing in revenue, then I can know that I can leave this, but I'm learning at the same time. And so I love that you just spoke about that, because that's what I tried to push our fellow veterans into when they are talking about entrepreneurship. And so I'm curious, what motivated you to start your own LLC back in 2018? And have you always had an entrepreneurial spirit, or was that something that you kind of discovered over the course of your career and life experience, or what was that?
Yeah. Can we hold that question for 1 second? And I want to hit on one other thing.
Absolutely.
You asked about finding the transition from Colonel Fivecoat to David. And one of the things that I encourage all your veterans out there that are thinking about transitioning, at least for me, one of the things that helped me find a bedrock or a foundation was athletics or sports or physical fitness. And for me, one of the things I loved about the Army was I would always joke that, hey, we're professional athletes because we're actually getting paid to work out. And I doubled down on that in the transition period. I got into racing, half Ironman triathlons, cycling. And so that to me was one of those things that helped me establish a newer identity. It's not like you don't get rid of everything and start new, but find whether it doesn't matter whether it's pickleball or CrossFit or triathlons or cycling or whatever. Find something that you can do every day that's going to keep you healthy long term, that you enjoy, because realize there were probably lots of things about Army PT that you hated, or Navy PT or Air Force PT. Well, figure out the one thing you like and do that every day. And, it'll keep you healthy long term. It'll help you, clear your mind. It'll help you forge a new identity. There's just so many positives out of it but I think a lot of veterans are tired of the mandatory PT. And so they go, I think, you were a perfect example. You got out and you ate a lot and didn't work out.
I got out and I quit working out. And because I quit working out, and the number of deployments, with the nature of what, infantrymen do, my body started to break down. The pain started to creep in. The joints started to get stiff. And then I'd start making excuses. And then before you know it, I weigh 311 pounds. I'm sitting on the couch eating like shit. And like you're alluding to, I walk 4 miles as soon as I get out of bed every morning. I do lots of pull-ups and push-ups throughout the day. I'm part of this veterans nonprofit 6-month QRF Fit program, stood up by Christopher Phillips with Rich Mulder as the board of directors. And I feel amazing, and it's so much better because I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for the Army. I'm not doing it in an organized fashion. I'm doing it whenever I want, and I love that you spoke to that, because it is so important. Like, I think, like you said, I was fed up with the Army PT. I got to be a PT at 6:00. I've never been a runner. I hated it. I was built to carry a ruck and walk far, right? And so running for me was primarily what we do in the infantry. Monday mornings, you can guarantee, was an 8-mile run or whatever. And I hated it, especially in formation, And so I did. I just quit doing everything. And, having lost 95 pounds now, and I actually look forward to my workouts, and they boost my mental health and obviously my physical health, and just it gives me time to work out the stuff in my head that needs to be worked out so that I can be mindful and more productive. So I'm glad that you touched on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No, like you, I roll out of bed, I get a cup of coffee, and then me and the dog head out the door for. We always get 2 miles in every morning, but that's kind of standard.
It's a great
Yeah,
way to start your day, right? I mean, it's just, I get up at 6, so the sun is coming up over the course of the hour that it takes me to walk those 4 miles, and I got my two dogs, and it's quiet and not a lot of traffic out, and I don't know, it definitely does something for me for sure.
well, I'm sure you're the same way. Even if I don't get anything else in during the rest of the day, it's still a win to get that 2 mile walk in, and I do a couple of sets of push-ups and sit-ups before I get out the door. And hey, if I don't get anything else, that's okay. I did something. It's better than sitting on the couch all day.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. It's the one thing I can count on myself to get done every single day because it's the first thing.
Right, right. And I think a
I
lot
love
of
it, man.
veterans, that would help their transition go smoother if they. I know some of it is you want to revolt against the man and not do PT because you don't have to, but doing PT because you want to, and
I
it's a
think
good thing.
honestly what I've learned is to make the transition go smoothly, you have to maintain routine. It doesn't have to be the same routine that you had in the army. You don't need to be at formation at 5:30 for 06 PT or whatever, but you do need to maintain some kind of routine. For me, it's get up at 6 o'clock every morning, put my shoes and socks on, out the door for a 4 mile walk, right? If that's the only thing I get done that day, it's a good day. Honestly, because I didn't falter, or I didn't fail to carry out that part of my routine. And as you get that built up, it continues to just transfer to every other area of your life.
Yep, yep. No, I'm a big fan of routines and habits and all those things that are so helpful as you're trying to create your own life post army or post military.
Yeah, because you get to be the one giving yourself orders now, right? The army's not telling you you have to be at formation at this time. It's solely up to you. So yeah, I love it. Anyway, back to your consulting, the Fivecoat Consulting Group. So you said you stood that up in 2018 as an LLC, and you used it as a pass through as a 1099. I did the same thing with my LLC. I ran my insurance agency, failed insurance agency through that. And so what turned you on to entrepreneurship? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so when I got out of the army, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Um, Back in high school, as we sort of, I thought maybe I wanted to be a lawyer, but as I looked around, there weren't any law schools within 100 miles of Columbus that would have made it easy to go to law school for 3 years. Um, and so, all right, so I threw that out, and then I was like, okay, I'll try the big company route, and applied to some of those. And I told you about Synovus, the regional bank, that it ended up taking too long to create the position. But I ended up starting to do 1099 work for this other veteran-owned company that took corporate groups to battlefields. I got to combine leadership training and history all in one. It was a phenomenal package, and I loved doing the work. Um, but fast forward to 2020, I got crosswise with the CEO, and I got let go of that company. And so at that point in time, it's the beginning of COVID. Doesn't look like anything's going on for a while. And I was like, all right, I was sort of like, F it, I'll just start my own company. And so I would not recommend starting your own company in March of 2020.
Not a
Uh,
good time. No.
and I've told other folks this, and so I think you'll understand based off your insurance company. In some ways, I did not I did not fully understand the amount of risk that entrepreneurs and small business owners undertake. If you do not have clients coming in the front door, you are not gonna make money. And I had some very lean quarters where not a whole lot of clients came in the front door, and I'm actually in one right now just because last for my business, and I don't know if it was the same for your business, but for me, it tends to be about a 6 month. You start engaging with somebody, and then it actually turns into work, and so it's a slow cycle for me, at least. It may have been that way for you in the insurance company. I don't know. Um,
Insurance was a little different because we had leads. So I started knocking doors. So 5 days a week out on the road knocking doors. The problem I had with insurance was I didn't know anything about chargebacks, and nobody taught me anything about follow ups. So while I was good at selling an intangible product to poor people, essentially, I felt sleazy about it. I got to the point where so many of them couldn't afford the premiums or whatever that they would stop paying them. And now all of a sudden I owe 8 months of commission check back to the insurance company. So essentially I got to the point where I felt like in order to be successful at this, I cannot spend any money essentially for 9 months. And that's just
yeah,
not going to work. Right.
yeah. Wow, I didn't understand that was the way it worked in insurance.
There's various different ways that it works, but that's the first company I got hooked up with as a 1099 guy. And again, I didn't know what I didn't know about it. And so when you said, I didn't understand the amount of risk that entrepreneurs take. Like it is incredible how risky it actually is, particularly with not having any knowledge, right? Just jumping into it. So yeah, that definitely hit with me and
Yeah,
resonated.
yeah. Well, and the nice thing is, I think you have a small safety net between, the healthcare. If you got medically boarded, I think you've got the healthcare, and then you've got the VA benefits. And so you have a small safety net. I have a small safety net with the pension and the VA benefits and the healthcare. Um, so that does make entrepreneurship easier, and that I encourage veterans that have that safety net to look into entrepreneurship, because you have an advantage over somebody that doesn't have any of that stuff, and it helps to smooth out that risk a little bit. um, I probably wouldn't have started the company had I not worked for the small business, and then uh, got let go and decided to create my own. I did have a 3-year non-compete on taking folks to battlefields, and so um, I had to. So I branched out. I I started out doing business consulting and keynote speeches, and a lot of those were virtual for the first year. And then I was talking to a client, and the client said, "Hey, do you do executive coaching?" And I was like, "Heck yes, I do executive coaching. What do you mean? I've been coaching, lieutenants and captains and majors, for 20 years." Um, and so that was a fortuitous event, and I like, okay, I started expanding my executive coaching side of the business, and it has been extremely rewarding, both personally and professionally. I feel like I'm able to help people, um, and it's enjoyable work, and you can do it from anywhere. And so I encourage veterans that maybe can't figure out what they want to do when after they transition, to at least look at coaching. And there's lots of opportunities in the military. The Army right now, there's a coaching program in the Army that will pay for your coaching certificate. You can pay for it yourself. There's lots of options out there for coaches. And then to find, in the, if you have a coaching certificate, you can always find a company that needs coaches, and you become a 1099 for that company for a couple of years, and you see how they do it and see the insides of their business and what you like and what you don't like. And then you can stand up your own, and you can even do that on the side with a normal 9 to 5, job of some other type. And so I I think
But David, what if I don't feel like I'm good enough to be a coach?
well, imposter syndrome is real. I I sometimes feel like it too. That hey, how can I possibly help this executive that's running a $2 billion line of business? Uh, but the thing that you're valuable at. Uh, is you bring a slightly different perspective from your military background that the corporate execs don't have. And you might look at the problem slightly different. And I tend to do 6-month engagements with these corporate executives. And frankly, if you give them 2, 3, or 4 tools that they can add to their leadership toolkit over that 6-month engagement, it's a win. They are not getting that sort of. The other interesting thing, having watched corporate America now for 7 years, corporate America does not have the dedication to the training and education that the Army does.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just my limited experience in corporate America, the training is awful. I think that was my biggest issue with the insurance industry as a whole is they're just so desperate to make money with salespeople that they don't train them. They don't care.
And frankly, for those veterans out there that are trying to figure out what they want to do, and maybe while you're doing job interviews, take a 2 or 3 week sales class. And just learn some of the tips and techniques that will make you a better salesperson, because no matter what job you go into, there's some aspect of sales to it. Whether you're a government contractor, there's an amount of, hey, are we going to bid for that next contract, and how do we make sure that we are postured and make that sale so we can continue to exist as a company, to being an insurance salesman and going door to door and knocking on doors, to being an executive coach and doing coaching calls, to try to drum up business.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that, because one of the best pieces of wisdom I got from the insurance industry was, I had the agent over me when I worked at Allstate. She had told me, she's like, you need to just look at everything like this. You're either buying or selling something in this world, period, end of story. There's no other way about it. So I agree, taking a sales course, part of being an entrepreneur is selling yourself. Like you said, if you're a government contractor, you need to sell why you're the best company in this bid to do this, execute on this contract. In corporate America, why are you the best fit for this role at this company? You have to sell.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely something that maybe you don't have as a military person that you can add to your skill set as you get ready to get out.
Yeah, and to your point, right, about that, you said it's a good skill that the military doesn't teach you to get while you're out. But here we believe, the reason I believe that the path back to purpose is entrepreneurship is because of all the what I call high leverage skills that you develop over the course of your career: leadership, adaptability, problem solving. We could go on and on and on about that, but you're right. Sales is not one of those that you're taught. You're very much in a fixed mindset in the military: mission first, then follow orders and just execute, right? And so getting a skill like sales just gives you another tool in your tool belt that you already have that you may not realize you have when you get out into the civilian world, right?
Right. Yeah, I took a several week sales course, and it was one of the best things that I've done. I still use some of the techniques from it even today.
Yeah. So what is your consulting group? What is your primary focus on executive coaching? And kind of, you are the first that is actually an executive coach that we've had on the show. And so I'd love to hear kind of what your approach to executive coaching is, and really what executive coaching is in general, because I think there's a misconception out there that, like, I'm coming out of the military as a E6, E7, 03, 04, 05. I'm not really qualified to coach these executives who are managing $2 billion companies, right? So can you expand on that a little bit?
So, executive coaching is, there's some things that it's not. It's not therapy. You're not a certified therapist, but you're there to try to improve the performance of somebody. The way that I tackle it, there's a coaching certification organization called ICF, the International Coaching Federation. I went through their course in the fall. You have to get 100 hours of coaching under your belt afterwards, and then you get tested. I'm almost finished with 100 hours and about ready to take the test. But eventually you get certified by this coaching group of, hey, you are an executive coach. With these executives, you're just trying to help them perform the best that they can be. Some things that I do to help that executive improve their performance is, first off, I like to help them understand their strengths and gaps as a leader. And there's a couple ways to do that. Some companies use 360 evaluations, just like the Army does. That's a great tool to help them understand what their peers and direct reports think are their strengths and gaps. And then also, I got certified in an assessment tool, which is called the Hogan Assessment. It's like a Myers-Briggs, if you've ever taken a Myers-Briggs test, but it's tailored just for business. Once again, it's one of those skills that I've added to my toolkit. And so all the folks that come to get coached by me take the Hogan Assessment, and we use that to talk about what their strengths are and what their gaps are as a leader. And it helps them to just have a better picture of themselves. And then that's typically our first session. The second session, we do a personal purpose exercise, help them find their personal purpose. Why are they doing this, both for personal and professional reasons? And then we go do a session of better goal setting. And after that, it's all up to whatever the executive wants to work on. And hopefully some of it is based on the goal setting, because one of the things I think I help out and do a pretty good job of as an executive coach is provide accountability. If you tell me you want to lose that last 10 pounds, every single session that we have, I'm going to ask you about, hey, how's that weight loss going? How's that weight loss going? How's that weight loss going? But also, some of it is also making sure that the executive actually identifies their own accountability partners as well, in addition to the coach. For you, it may be, your spouse, your kids, your dog. Hey, I'm doing this so, I can keep up with the dog, or whatever your accountability tool is. It's not just me as the coach. It's helping you, because the strongest things and the things that we accomplish are ones that we set for ourselves and then we work towards. But sometimes it helps to have that little extra external push from a coach, because every 2 weeks I'm going to ask you, hey, how's your weight loss going? Did you lose that? You said you were going to lose 2 pounds from last week. How's that going? And just keep up that rhythm and help you keep accountable.
Oh, it's so true. Until I sat down hard and asked for an accountability partner and one of my best friends to hold me accountable to the things that I said I was going to do, it's you get into that rhythm of, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Now you've got somebody in your face like, hey, did you do this thing? And why didn't you if you didn't do this thing? And then again, speaking to, having a coach in your life, I've been lucky on my journey to get several people that I didn't have to pay any money to, who just really resonated with what I was trying to do to coach me along and show me, kind of help illuminate the next steps on the path. Because so much of entrepreneurship is you just don't know. You have no idea, right? And as you hit certain milestones or certain growth markers or have small wins that turn into one big win, it really starts to inform your path forward. And having accountability partners and people to coach you through that really opens up your perspective and kind of shows you, all of your options that you may not be able to see.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also important for as the coach to have some humility and also curiosity. And I'm fascinated by the executives, and I'm going to ask them, when they say, "Oh yeah, we really knocked it out of the park with the 13-week P&L or whatever," I'm okay with asking the question of, all right, so what exactly does that mean? Where were you successful in the P&L? Where were you not successful in P&L? For those who don't know, is the profit and loss statement. 13-week P&Ls are sort of what drive businesses. And so asking those questions and having the curiosity and humility to ask those questions is extremely helpful, because sometimes the executive will realize, oh, just like, if I had a coach when I was in the Army, sometimes I will realize that, maybe what I think is sound and a good idea, as I try to explain it to an outsider that doesn't really understand it that well, maybe doesn't make as much sense as I thought it did when I was selling it to myself. And so,
Well, what you're talking about sounds like a carryover from the Army and just doing an AAR on everything that you do, right? Three improves, three sustains, asking those hard questions of yourself so that you're not, being unconsciously biased about the results of whatever your 13-week P&L was. So, again, another skill that the Army has taught you that is extremely valuable in business, I
yeah,
would say.
and I take the AAR concept right into my executive coaching practice. So that they accomplish something, and I inevitably go, okay, so what was one good thing about that? What was the thing that you want to replicate in the future, and then what's one thing that you'd like to improve? Those are great questions to ask as an executive coach, and really help people, even though they don't know it and you're sneaking in the AAR on them, they're great tools to ask as a coach and get them to open up and figure out, what they're going to do the same and what they're going to do differently in the future.
What do you find rewarding about being an executive coach?
I like seeing the progress, and the growth. That to me is, where an executive may take a couple ideas, from you and uses them. Uh, that to me is where I get the satisfaction and the feeling like, hey, I really helped this person. Are you gonna, you know, is the executive coaching gonna, result in, a 10% profit increase in the company? I don't know, but that growth out of the executive is really where I find it very, very rewarding as a coach.
And so, as a coach, is a lot of what you're coaching these executives in maybe more personal growth and development than it is, the business side of things, right? If they're a CEO of this $2 billion company, I'm sure you're going in there like, I'm not really coaching this dude on business. He knows more about business than I do. But I feel like, the biggest thing for me and uh, I guess that changed everything for me was the personal development piece, the way I talk to myself, the way, that I treat myself and all of that good stuff. So is that what you're finding that you're doing for these
Yeah,
clients?
because I certainly don't have as much business experience as they have, but I do have experience leading people. I think you were a squad leader or even acting platoon sergeant at some point in time, and so you supervised, six or seven or eight or 30 individuals, and sometimes, depending on the executive, you certainly have as much experience as they've got leading people day in, day out. And so asking them questions like, okay, how do you organize your day? Do you have a list of, do you use a daily list to drive, what you're going to accomplish? Uh, how does your meeting running? Describe your meeting. Is somebody take it? Do you set an agenda? Does somebody take notes? Simple kind of things like that we often forget as leaders as we get busy and things. Uh, yeah, I learn things from these executives that I take forward and try to teach others. Like, um, this one company used this term leadership shadow. And well, the first, I don't know if you ever got into this, but sometimes on the officer side, we would get into esoteric debates about the meanings of different tactical tasks and how there's a whole dictionary out there, and whether, if you tell somebody to seize a piece of terrain, they actually have to put boots on the ground on that piece of terrain. If you tell somebody that they can secure it, they can actually secure it with Overwatch, with eyes, and they don't necessarily have to go on that piece of ground. Foolishly, I thought that the business world also spent a lot of time discussing those words, and had like when they went and got an MBA, that they would sort of give them the dictionary of terms and everybody would use the same thing. I have been in a room where an executive has used the word vision, strategy, mission interchangeably or in three different ways. They will use vision three different ways. And so, for as good as the corporate guys are on the business side, and they can calculate their EBITDA, and EBITDA is earnings before interest and tax. Uh, uh, Amortization is the A. They know those terms down cold, but when they start talking about actually leading people, there's a lot of confusion over trying to keep those words. And every company wants to have their mission, their vision statement, their goals and values. And so I learned things from the executives. One of these things was a leadership shadow. I actually dug into it and wrote a blog post about it, because I discovered that the company had actually taken the term and wasn't using it in the same way that all the articles talked about the way that you use the term. And it was more sort of, they were using leadership shadow as leadership impact. And actually leadership shadow is the idea, the original idea in the Harvard Business Review article was this idea of, you want to focus your actions and your words and there's two other things, but the idea is to get them all focused in the exact same. So there's no difference between your actions and your words, or your actions and your emails. And that's was what the original term for leadership shadow meant, but this company is using it in a different way. And I don't really care which way, whatever way you want to use it. It made sense as, hey, this is, your leadership shadow is the three leaders that you grew and became, future managers or whatever. But it was just, I learned from them, and hopefully feedback things to them from the Army side, which is, hey, we need to be precise on our terms and what they actually mean, and then use them consistently in that way. If everybody in the company is using it in the same way, that's fine. But let's agree that that's how we're using it.
Yeah, and it's really, I would relate that to basically brand strategy, right? Like there's a way that you build, in my case, a personal brand, right? And there's a language that you speak to your target audience in with an ICP that's literally a customer avatar, right? And all of that gives you the consistency you need to grow and get your message across so that it resonates with who you're trying to target. So that's awesome.
Now I'm going to throw something back. I'm going to ask you a
Are,
question. I think you should describe to your audience what ICP and avatar is, because I didn't understand those before. I was running my own company.
Yeah, so your ICP is your ideal client profile. That is who do you want to be a qualified buyer of whatever it is that you're trying to sell, good, service, or whatever. And the customer avatar, my two customer avatars' names are, I think, Mike and Joe. One of them is modeled after the enlisted guy getting out like I was at 12, 13 years, not happy with the Army saying that, hey, I'm done with you. And the other one is somebody like you who was on the officer side, who probably had a little bit longer career, had a degree already, and the transition looks different. And so, those are what I use to build any of my LinkedIn posts, any of my, my email marketing stuff, all of the stuff for the Stronghold, the community that launches on August 1st, aimed at showing transitioning veterans, what entrepreneurship is, giving them a community and access to people who are actively building businesses so that they can learn. And that's what those are, in a nutshell. I mean, they get way more complicated. And I have an amazing brand strategist on my team. Asaf is phenomenal. He unlocked so much for me by sitting down and making me go through a brand workshop and really hammering out the ICP and my mission and my values and understanding how all of this stuff works together to build a business.
Now, where did you find your brand strategist?
On LinkedIn. I sure did. Yeah. Funny story. He and I started building our things on LinkedIn at the same time, around November of last year. I think I had like 93 followers at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just challenged to post on LinkedIn and engage with 5 people's content who resonated with me. And that has ultimately turned into me having a conversation with a full bird colonel who did 24 years and a podcast and a community and just countless opportunities. I now have my SDVOBC. I'm really interested in taking government contracts. It's amazing what LinkedIn has done for me.
Well, and on the same token, I know you found your brand strategist on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of Fiverr. I don't know if you've used Fiverr.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. My wife is actually she's a freelancer on Fiverr in the SEO space.
For those that don't know, Fiverr is an online. I don't know. I guess
freelance network.
And
basically.
I found, different people that have helped. Like the guy that designed my logo, I found on Fiverr. The guy that did this little bit of work, the guy that did or the woman that did the index for my book. I didn't know that there were professional indexers out there, but once my book was ready to go, I was like, it needs an index. So I hired her off Fiverr and she did the index. So you can, even as a one-person shop, you can get help as you're trying to grow your business, and whether it's Fiverr or LinkedIn or wherever else, there's people out there that can help you, grow your business or expand your business or make it even better.
Absolutely. I think this is a perfect segue because since you just mentioned a professional indexer for your book, so what inspired you to write your book, first of all? And will you talk about what that process was like? Because I had a conversation with a guy last week who said he never wants to write another book after writing 4 or 5 of them because he says it's just such a monster undertaking.
Yeah. Okay. So I had always had the idea to write a book. While I was in the Army, I wrote probably 5 to 10 professional articles that got published in Infantry Magazine, Armor Magazine, Proceedings, et cetera. So I had that writing bug, and I knew I was decent at it. But I hadn't ever wanted to tackle a book. And so I actually, round 1 of trying to do a book, I started blogging at the beginning of COVID. And I'm taking a break right now from blogging. I did 300 plus blog posts. You probably found them on the webpage. But I kind of was a little burnout, and I was like, okay, I need to take a break on doing blog posts. So I'm in my break. But the first book attempt was to take some of the best blog posts and turn it into a book. I showed it to an editor that was a ex Air Force. Using the veteran network is awesome. I think I found her on LinkedIn. And so for your other veteran entrepreneurs out there, don't be afraid to leverage the veteran network. Well, she took one look at it and said, "Hey, basically, I'm going to have to rewrite this whole thing. This is garbage." My ego was pretty well dented after that. I'm like, "Oh, that's BS. It's good." I now realize she was right and I was wrong, but I shelved it. Like, okay, I'm not gonna not going to write a book. And then about 4 or 5 months later, I was talking to once again, this is how I get into stuff. I was talking to a client, and he was like, "Hey, you're kind of gritty. Why don't you look at this other guy's grit book and tell us what you think?" So I looked at it, and I thought it was kind of trash. And they're like, "Yeah, we're going to hire this guy to teach grit to our group for thousands of dollars." I'm like, "Huh." And then he was like, "You're kind of gritty. Why don't you write a book on grit?" I'm like, "Huh, okay." And so that sparked it, and then I was off to the races writing the book. I eventually rolled the chapters. So I stole an idea from a science fiction writer, the guy that wrote Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, the book that got turned into the movie with I think it's Matt. Is it Matt Damon? Yeah. Um, he actually rolled the chapters out of that book in his blog, and then he had all these scientists that were following his blog that would actually comment on the chapter, and he used that as basically like crowdsourced editing, and like, oh, oh, I need to chop the potato up into smaller pieces or whatever it was, or whatever. He used that to improve the book, and then he eventually rolled it out as a self-published book, and then it got picked up by one of the major publishing houses. So I rolled chapters out on my blog. So you can actually go way back in early 21. Most of the chapters in the book are in an early form out in the blog. And then put it together, found an editor, found somebody to help me self-publish it, and published it and released it on Amazon in July of 2021. And so from flash to bang, it was probably about 9 months from the person saying, "Hey, why don't you write a gritty book?" to it actually being out on the street. And I would say that is ridiculously fast. And as I'm doing with book number 2, I probably need to go a little bit slower, but I'm probably going to be just as stupid and try to crank it out in 9 months or a year to try to get it out there.
That's the
Right,
infantryman in
right,
you. That's what
right.
that is.
Not hard, not. I don't know.
Harder, not
Yeah, harder,
smarter,
not
right?
smarter. So interesting. You can, if you have a cover, you can go on Amazon and hang your cover for a self-published book and sell pre-sales for the book. But you have to have your book, the digits of your book, hung on Amazon like a week or 10 days prior to release. If you don't meet that timeline, Amazon puts you in timeout for like 2 months, and you can't sell the book for like 2 months down the road till you get your act together and get the thing done. So I have not put the cover together yet or done it, but I totally did the book all by myself. I had an editor. I used what are called beta readers, where you send a copy of the book out to readers. They read it and provide feedback. The editor went through it twice. Once sort of a big overhaul, and then you have 6 or 8 weeks to fix what she said, and then I did it again, and she had another 6 weeks to play with it and edit it, and then it was in kind of its format. Just like any major project in the Army or in corporate America, for me at least, my goal was to do something for the book every day. And it can be simple as edit a chapter. I'm an iterative writer. And so like right now I've got 2 chapters sitting here on the desk that I'm in the process of editing and rewriting. And so I will print all the chapters out and lay them out, and then edit, re-edit until I'm finally sort of comfortable with it. But also now that this is book number 2, I understand that a lot of this stuff will get improved by the editor and the beta readers, and some of those folks will come back with better ideas on how to fix it. So it takes a village. And so, you need a pretty big group. This is just for your readers. This is the book. It's called Grow Your Grit. And it's, for most folks, I will say that a book today it tends to be, when you think about this book, I think all in, I'm somewhere at $5,000 or $6,000 to get that book out, between cover design, editor, formatting, indexer. I paid somebody off Fiverr to do the audio book, because I didn't want to sit in a room and read my own book for 3 days and not get the audio right. And so it has sold, at least on Amazon, it sold 600 copies on Amazon, but I think I'm at 2,000 copies all in, between stuff that I've sold on my own. I can get books printed cheaper than on Amazon from another company called Ingram Spark. There's a lot of esoteric things. So if any of your listeners are interested in writing a book, I'm happy to do an hour-long Zoom call with them and help them out through the process, and tell them the lessons that I learned and things that I wouldn't do again, and things that I would do again. But it was I'm not like your other podcaster or other guest. I'm into book 2, and I have ideas for book 3 and book 4 out there.
So this is something you want to keep doing?
Yeah. I had this idea that I wanted to write a fiction book, but I couldn't get going on it. And, you know, and this may be something as I'm aging, but I realized that the book is one of those few tangible things that I have created that's there's a legacy. It will last after I'm no longer here. And the business that I've built, TFCG, is basically, it's a modern business. It is it's a website. It's some Zoom stuff. It's some logos, some merchandise, and that's about it. It's a
It's a
digital
digital
business,
business,
and so
right?
when
Yeah.
I decide to take down the website, the business basically is closed down, and so it's not like I'm passing, a business. I have she's almost 15 now, a 15-year-old daughter, and so it's not like I've got anything in the business to pass to her. And I was like, so maybe I need to write some books, and that'll be sort of the legacy, are these books. So
Yeah.
um,
I like that. I like that a lot. That's pretty powerful. There's a lot with the process of writing a book. You did 300 blog posts, you said, and started getting burnt out. Were you also optimizing those for SEO and targeting keywords, or were you just writing and publishing
I was just
articles?
writing on whatever I wanted to write on. I did some SEO optimization with the overall web page. Um, Interestingly, the blog posts that went viral were ones that I couldn't tell you why they went viral. Um,
That's usually how it
right.
happens,
And
right?
my number one blog post out there is on, John Wooden and the Wooden Pyramid, which was a leadership tool. John Wooden was a basketball coach for UCLA, won 10 or 11 national championships with UCLA. Didn't hurt that he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the team for 3 of those years. But he was the basketball coach of the late 60s and 70s. And then he became sort of this father figure, mentor, in his later years. And I wrote this blog post on it. I eventually got certified in the Wooden coaching method. There's a guy on the West Coast that offers that. But the blog post still gets hundreds of views every day. It, so I don't know. I was using the blog as a way to market myself. I sort of got distracted.
in the executive coaching
Yeah, yeah. And
space,
so I
right?
would,
Yeah, and that's where I was going with this, because that's a great way to leverage to get organic traffic to a website that you own, right? Like, because the whole point of building any digital business is, I don't want my audience to live on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn can take it from me. I need them in my email list or on my website, because I own that and nobody can take that from me, short of the internet shutting down, which I don't see that happening anytime soon, right? We're just too connected and everything else. And so that's why I was curious if you were optimizing those blog posts to drive traffic back to your offer, because that would be the smart way to do it. And I'm generally curious, where did you learn the process for, you informed me of something, I learned something here today, beta readers. I had no idea that was a thing. I didn't know there was professional indexers. Did you just happen to do like what I did? I spent a lot of time on YouTube trying to sort through who's a guru and who's actually not full of shit and is giving me good advice. I spent a lot of time doing that, analysis paralysis, whatever. Or did you network? And I know you said you had given the first copy that you had shelved to an editor who told you it was garbage, and that gave you the ego hit. But then you had a meeting with a client, which is kind of the networking piece of this, who's like, you should write a book about grit. Because I'm finding, as I'm growing here too, the networking piece, meeting people, is how you get in front of opportunities, and how I learn things that I would have never been able to find on my own, or I guess know that I needed to know or learn.
yeah. So I went down some rabbit holes. So the first thing, so the interesting thing as an entrepreneur is I've had to teach I'm 53 right now. The company started going in 20, so I was 49 at that point in time. Wonderful growth and development out of being an entrepreneur. The first thing I taught myself was how to run a Squarespace web page, because and I since have paid somebody to do a professional update to it. But for 2.5 years, I ran my own. I had one version, and then I didn't like it, so I took it all the way down and built a complete new version up. So I went through like 3 iterations of the blog, of the web page and the blog. Um, but that one for me, I found. So on my walks in the morning, I like to listen to podcasts, and so I found a podcaster on that was into Squarespace website development, and I listened. It was called My Squarespace Bestie or something like that. And so I listened to like 10 or 15 of her of of her podcasts, read all of her blog, and then sort of started doing it. I did the same thing on the deep dive into writing a book. I found somebody, listened to a bunch of podcasts, tried to sort through the wheat from the chaff, figure out what was good, what wasn't good, read some blogs, and figure out, that, and then put my own spin on it. Everything that I've ever done, though, I've also written a blog post about it. So like there's blog posts up on my website, either under the historic side on like 10 lessons I learned from writing a book. And, I tried to capture some of this stuff. So in case, I get a call from a random person, I can always give them a link to one of the blog posts and say, here, go look at this. For the first 2 years, I did 2 blog posts a week. I was doing like Mondays and Thursdays, and then I took it down to 1 day a week. I did get a little distracted when the war in Ukraine kicked off. I got fascinated by that, and there was a guy that was doing real time accounting of Russian and Ukrainian vehicle losses. And he was doing that by he would scrape social media and take a picture of the tank and figure out what kind of tank it was, and then make sure that it wasn't a picture of any of the other tanks that he said has been destroyed. And it was like, you've been out to NTC, you've been in the big battles with the Krasnovians. It was like watching real live Krasnovian, versus US fights in NTC and battle tracking. And so every week I was, for over almost 2 years, for the first year I did it every week. And then I shifted it to once a month, and I would do a monthly update on the war in Ukraine. And then once again, at 2 years into the war, I was sort of burnt out, and it wasn't. And the guy that was doing it was a group of Dutch guys that was doing the update on the losses. They decided to close down their site because I think they were getting attacked by too many Russian bots, and they were tired of fending off the Russian bots. And so when they said that they were shelving their accounting tool, I wasn't willing to start on a new accounting tool and try to figure that out. And so I shelved the Ukrainian blog post, but I really was like, I can, as you're thinking about a veteran, I was like, hey, this is a service I could provide to others where I can apply the knowledge that I learned in the military. I can take this guy's real live counting of vehicles. I can compare it to the number of Russian vehicles that other guys think are out there, and give an estimated sort of, score on what's going on in Ukraine.
One, it kind of kept you close to, where you had just come from too, right? In the Army and doing what you were doing. And I think there's elements of that we all sometimes long for, which sometimes contributes to the transition being harder or whatever. I know it took me a long time to really let go of that stuff, particularly because, some of the guys I was mentoring were still deploying, right? Because I got out in 2015, and they were still going overseas and still asking my advice. And it's like, man, I need to either detach from this, or I need to be involved in this. I can't do this like half in, half out thing. So yeah, no, that's awesome. How do you decide, so your second book is called Atomic, right? I have the title. Forgive me. So how do you decide, what you want to write a book about? What's your process like on that? Because, I've often thought I need to write a book about my experiences, particularly my Afghanistan deployment, because that one, I don't know how to explain. It was different and so much worse than the other three that I had done to Iraq that it's really largely overshadowed the other three deployments. And I sat down with one of my very close friends while we were at the tail end of that deployment, and we actually wrote a chapter to a book. And it really it's been shelved for going on, I don't know, that was 2012, so 12 years now. But every now and again, I'll go back to it and I'll read what we wrote, and it's like, man, sometimes I think I should write a book. But how do you get your ideas? Is it just your military history influence? Because I mean, the Manhattan Project, the Oppenheimer movie just came out not too long ago, so this is all coming back into the mainstream.
All right, so two ideas. All right, so the book, in my line of work, the book establishes some credibility, and then hopefully you can get some speaking gigs off of it. For the most part,
which then you can promote the book and make more money.
Well, for the most part, the books are money losers. I'm probably right at the point in time where I've sold enough books, that I've made the money back that I've I don't think it cost me about $500 to do the audio book. And I only did it because a bunch of folks asked me to do it, but I've only sold 25 audiobooks, and the profit that I see off the audiobook is, I think somewhere between $2 and $3 an audiobook. So you pay $8.99 for it or $7.99 for it, and I think I get 3 out of it. That's a heck of a lot of audiobooks that aren't flying off the shelf right now, and so it's a money loser. But in some ways, it's like a big business card. And so one of the more interesting things is I didn't write it with this intention, but I actually send the book to all my executive coaching clients, because there's a chapter in there on finding your personal purpose. There's a chapter in there on better goal setting. And I make them read those 2 chapters for homework. And then then we talk about it during the session. And so it was fortuitous that I wrote it that way, but it has become good for the executive coaching side. The Manhattan Project came out when I was working for the old company. I started working with Sandia Labs, which is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's part of the Department of Energy Infrastructure, and they opened my eyes to all the stuff that the Department of Energy is doing. So you've got the national laboratories that are at in Berkeley, in Los Alamos. You've got Sandia. You've got in Texas, where they destroy nuclear weapons. You've got Kansas City, where they build them. You've got Savannah and Hanford and Oak Ridge, where they work on parts of it. So the DOE infrastructure is pretty large, and I enjoyed working with those folks because they're super bright. They've got the mission and the passion in the same way that we did in the Army. And I was like, how can I drum up more business working with these folks? And I was like, well, 1, they don't really know their history. And 2, there's so many leadership lessons out of the Manhattan Project that I can dig into and find and can use as things that then they can take and apply to the challenges that are in their modern business. And so that was the inspiration for it. And I was sort of playing with 3 different ideas with books. I had one on better corporate planning, and then another book on leadership secrets from the Apollo program. And this one, I don't know what it was, but I just sort of got the spark and the inspiration. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go hard on this one till I can finish it, and I'm gonna get this one done, and then I'll do the planning book next. The planning book is the next one.
I guess I'll be on the edge of my seat until you do the Apollo one, because that one, I live right down the road from Kennedy Space Center, which is one of my favorite places on the planet, and I would be all over that.
All right. The goal is to have those, a book a year, was to crank one out every year, and then take a pause. I have to do some more.
I believe
the
you can
planning
do
book
it.
will be rather quick. The Apollo book, I got to do a lot of research on, because I've done some, but I am not at the depth that I am at the Manhattan Project, where I've read, dozens of books. And actually, I'm going to the National Archives in 2 weeks to look at Leslie Groves's papers and another guy's papers, Ken Nichols. So I'm deep into that one, and I gotta get that one finished.
That's
But
really cool. One of my favorite authors is Jack Carr. He's the terminalist guy, the Navy SEAL, and yeah, it's already pre-ordered. It'll be delivered the day it releases, which is the 15th. I'm super excited about it. But I was reading his newsletter yesterday, and he did something that I'd never seen him do before, which was really interesting. He published, obviously they're all affiliate links in his newsletter, of course, but he all of the books that he read to write Red Sky Morning, which is the new book that's coming out. And I've never seen an author do that. And here you are talking about the process of researching for the Manhattan Project, going to the National Archives to check out these papers. And I think that's really cool. It's fascinating what actually goes into a good book. You know what I mean? And so I'm glad you gave us some insight into that. I really appreciate that, because I do know there's a lot of veterans I've talked to from my time in the service, and now out of it, and intermingling with them, who are interested in writing a book. So I know this is going to be incredibly valuable for them, so that they've got that insight into, kind of what it took and what your process was.
Well, and as an author, I find Carr interesting, because I believe, I don't know this for certain, because I've listened to some of his podcasts, and I read the first 4 books out of the terminal list. But but he does basically product placement in the books, which it's fascinating because book authors are struggling to make money unless you're like Patterson or Tom Clancy, which of course is now not being written by Tom Clancy but by others. You're not making a whole lot of money, or if you're Grisham, you're making money. There aren't a whole lot of folks that are out there that it's their full-time job. And I find it fascinating from the business side and from the author side. Is Carr supplementing his income by doing product placement in the book? Now, yeah.
1,000%, 1,000%. That's exactly what he's doing. And I, I think it's genius, to be honest. I mean, I kind of get sick of it. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, his last two books have been kind of lackluster to me as compared to the first four, like you were saying. And there is a lot more of the product placement, and he's explaining in detail the gloves that, James Reese is wearing. And I'm like, for those of us who military thrillers, espionage books, those are my favorite books to read. I don't know what it is. And it's a nice reprieve from all the business stuff that I consume all day long, every day. So, that's what I read at night. But I don't need to know that he's wearing a pair of the Oakley gloves with the carbon fiber knuckles that is model number whatever from the Oakley shop, right? Like, I'm very aware of what you're talking about. I don't care what scope he has on his long rifle right now. It doesn't, but you're right. It is fascinating because it is a business move, and good for him for figuring out a new way to make money. And I think that's awesome. What are your major goals and aspirations for the next few years? Obviously, you've got the second book coming out. You said you've got ideas for a third, fourth, and even a fifth book. But with the coaching business, any other entrepreneurial ventures you're interested in, or are you just really going to focus on the books and executive coaching?
So books and executive coaching make up a lot of it. The keynote speeches I enjoy. The opportunity, like a local group asked me, it was completely pro bono, but to come talk about D-Day. And I've got this great, I've given it to groups professionally on the strategic leadership of Dwight Eisenhower. And they wanted somebody to come talk to them on D-Day. So I tailored the talk into a 25-minute thing on Dwight Eisenhower and leading on D-Day and strategic leadership. And I I enjoy those kind of things. I like talking about that, where I can, the thing that I think I do, we've talked about it throughout this talk today, fuse military history with leadership. And now I have got some business sense. And so I can combine those three things together and actually do things. And so like the Manhattan Project is all to see if I can get groups to come to one of the great museums that are out there that detail different aspects of the Manhattan Project. And we can talk about the different characters and their leadership strengths and gaps. Leslie Groves, phenomenal leader. He's the 2-star general that led it from the Army side. He does not get as much credit as some of the others do, played by Matt Damon in the Oppenheimer movie. But his organizational skills and leadership was what made the program work and get the bomb to completion before the end of World War II. Now, some of his closest friends say that he was a son of a bitch to work for and was not the nicest person. And so he has his strengths in gaps. And so let's talk about that. And let's talk about how do what are good things that you can take from him, and then bad things that you can avoid to add to your leadership side. To me, that's what I'm trying to do, and trying to do that. And the executive coaching is also part of the business, and trying to grow that and maybe help folks on a one-on-one basis versus a 1 to 20 basis, where I can help somebody individually with some ideas like, hey, did you know Leslie Groves did this? Do you do that as part of your leadership practice? Oh, no, I don't. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about that. How would you implement that and do that on the coaching side? For me, it's just to continue to grow the business, try to help as many folks as I possibly can, and do projects that are interesting and help me fuel, my passion. And so, digging deep into the Manhattan Project has been interesting for me. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's interesting for me, and I like I like doing things like that, and then trying to write about it.
Well, I think that's the amazing thing about being an entrepreneur is you've now built a business that aligns with everything that makes you you basically, right? You're researching this book and writing this book based on something that aligns with your interests, and nobody's telling you you have to do this, and you get to do this. This is what you have chosen to do to earn a living, right? And the executive coaching, right? And because of researching the book, now you can talk about Leslie in your executive coaching business and adapt new lessons to help more executives be better. And that still fills your cup up. And so it's like you said, all these three things that are meshed together, the military history, the leadership, and, that's what entrepreneurship is about. And that's why I think from my point of view, the path to purpose for veterans after they get out is entrepreneurship, because it can be anything you want it to be. And you never really, I mean, you're going to have terrible days. You're going to have days where you're like, this sucks and I don't want to do it. But for the most part, it's overall the best
Yeah,
thing in the
yeah.
world.
No, you say that, and I'm, over my shoulder are my bikes, and that's a big part of me. I haven't figured out a way to get somebody to pay me to ride my bike, but maybe one day. But
Someday, right? Yeah. You think about
well,
it hard
well,
enough, you'll find a
there
way
is
to
a
do
guy
it.
here in
But
town that's a also a retired. I think he's a retired colonel, that does a triathlon coaching business. Now he's a GS employee out. He retired and he's a GS employee out in Fort Moore. But his side hustle, which is clearly his passion, is running this triathlon coaching business. And he's helped a lot of folks, run their first triathlon or run their first Ironman, or do whatever. And so there are lots of paths to entrepreneurship. You just got to be willing to take some risk. We talked about it earlier. In some ways, it's more risky than jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, or um, you know that you've got to be comfortable with.
doing
Yeah,
50 months in
yeah.
combat, right? Like it may be in some ways more
And you got to
risky
be
than
comfortable with
combat.
not having
I don't know if that's
that 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 check that comes every other week. Um, eh, and that's tough, because when the clients aren't there, uh, it's it's challenging. Like, I think I was about ready to talk about it. Uh, uh, the story is still in the front of my mind. In October and November and December of last year, my mom got diagnosed with dementia, and so I was flying back and forth to Ohio to help get her out of the condo, move her into assisted living, sell the condo, et cetera, et cetera. But that took, it's one of the challenges of being a solopreneur, is, I didn't do a whole lot of business development in October, November, and December. And as a result, I, I now realize that my company it's about a 6 month engagement to delivery. And
yeah, it's a
right.
6 month
So
sales
I'm
cycle.
having a rough
Yep.
second quarter right now. It's picking back up in third quarter, but and you have a few deals that you think are going to come across the goal line that don't come across the goal line, and all of a sudden you're like, shoot, I don't have a client in. I've got one client this month versus I wish I had 5 or 10.
But I think that's a lesson you can only learn by taking a chance on yourself and doing it, right? Like you would have had no idea. October, November, and December. I'm sorry for your mother, by the way. That my wife's grandmother has dementia, and so I know how hard that is. I see that. but you had no idea you're going to have to take the time, and the business was going to suffer. You had no idea what you could have put in place to mitigate, right, losing clients or not, whatever your sales process is, and I these are the things you can only learn through taking a chance. What advice do you have for any transitioning veteran who wants to be an entrepreneur, particularly those who didn't know entrepreneurship was actually an option for them?
The number one thing I talk about to folks that are getting out is, hey, go figure out something that you're passionate about and go work in a business in that area for a year or two, and keep adding to your toolkit. Take that sales course, go get certified in, whatever it is that you're, whether it's coaching or PMP or whatever. And then don't be afraid to hang your shingle out. All it takes is a website and a URL, and all of a sudden you're, and I think it's $50 to file an LLC in the state of Georgia. It might be 100. But you're off to the races, and for very little risk, and do it as a side hustle for a while. And if you get clients and the market validates that your idea is a good one, go full time on it and go all out and take that risk and become a full-time entrepreneur.
I couldn't agree more, man. How can the audience get in touch with you, find you? Where do you do most of your stuff at, so that we can get them to your books, get them to your coaching opportunities,
Yeah, so
all that good stuff?
I'm on both LinkedIn and my own website, which is the FivecoatConsultingGroup.com. One lesson learned for your future entrepreneurs. I knew the Fivecoat Consulting Group. Nobody had that, so I filed that as the LLC. I wanted to have the website as tfcg.com, but I didn't do the research on that before I filed the LLC. And lo and behold, I discovered that the Tanzanian Forest Conservation Group actually has tfcg.com. And so I don't think I'm ever prying it out of the Tanzanian Forest Conservation Group. So do a little bit better due diligence than I did on researching both your LLC and whatever your website name is, because the Fivecoat Consulting Group is a mouthful, and you have to spell that out every time to everybody. But yeah, I'm on the website and I'm on LinkedIn, and they can shoot me an email at david.fivecoat@thefivecoatconsultinggroup.com. And I'm happy to set up a phone call or a Zoom call and help other veterans in the transition as a way to give back to the community.
And is your book in bookstores?
The book is not
Can I go to Barnes and Noble this afternoon and buy it?
Bookstores. The book is on Amazon. It was at Target, on Target.com for a while, but that was only like the first year. But Amazon, you can get it hardcover, softcover, Kindle, or audiobook on Amazon.
Awesome, brother. Any final thoughts you want to leave our veteran audience with?
No, just thanks for what you're doing, and reaching out to the veteran community and helping folks learn and grow and take the risk and become entrepreneurs, and really follow their passion in their second chapter of life.
Yeah, brother, I couldn't sit by and pick up my phone to text messages of veterans taking their own lives anymore. Some of the finest men and women I ever served with, it was just like I had to step up and do something, and this is what I came up with. So, hopefully it's doing what it's intended to do. I will continue to do this and have amazing conversations with amazing veterans like you, and I really appreciate you and your time, and I'm super grateful to have had
thanks,
you
Adam. Thanks for having me. And if I can help you in what you're doing, please don't hesitate to reach back out.
Yeah, of course, brother. Everybody, please don't forget to go subscribe, like, rate, review, whatever you need to do so that we can get this in front of 1 million veterans by May 9th of 2025, the day I turn 40. That is the goal I've set for myself. I know it's lofty, but I also know that our community is amazing and we can get us there. So Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Fivecoat, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week, guys.